Hello everyone. Recently I had the opportunity to repair and refurbish my good friend's 2002 Mexican Stratocaster. He had been looking to get back into guitar for a while, but his guitar was involved in a flood and hadn't worked in some time. In this video I'm going to show you what I did from initial cleaning and inspection to rewiring and setting up the guitar. Lastly, I'll do a comparison between this guitar and my 2001 American Standard. As it was involved in a flood, my first worry was mold. After cutting off the strings, I took my time going around the body with disinfectant wipes while wearing mask and gloves. Before opening up the guitar, I wanted to test the electronics. I work on a tugboat and was about 20 miles offshore of Gloucester, Massachusetts, and didn't have my amp with me. I plugged in a cable I happened to have in my bag and tested with the resistance setting on a multimeter by pressing one probe to the tip of the cable and the other to the sleeve. After getting no readings, I knew that, at the minimum, the wiring harness was bad. I took off the pickguard and disinfected the cavity of the guitar, then cut the pickup leads at the selector switch. Knowing the electronics were bad, I wanted to test the pickups individually to see if it was only the wiring that would need to be replaced, and luckily all the pickups worked. The readings I recorded are on the screen. Knowing what parts I would need to order, my focus switched to getting the guitar as cleaned as I could. I removed the tremolo, tuners, and other hardware and let them have a bath and some naphtha. I wiped down the body and neck with some Murphy soap and water and then buffed everything with a microfiber cloth. Finally, I reassembled the guitar, as that was all the work I was going to be able to get completed while on board. My coworker and I had been recording a music video, and so we took full advantage of having the guitar on board to use as a prop. I ordered CTS 250K potentiometers, a Switchcraft jack, a .047 orange drop capacitor, and an Oak Grigsby 5-way selector switch to redo the electronics. Wiring a guitar is essentially a three-phase process: wiring the harness, wiring the pickups to the harness, and then wiring that to the output jack and the ground. I am by no means an expert, and have done this a grand total of 2 times. I found the YouTube channel 6 String Supplies to be extremely helpful, and recommend his channel to anyone looking to wire a guitar. As you can see, I'm referencing his channel on my iPad. What I'm doing right now is I am pre-tinning all the lugs that I'll be using and grounding each potentiometer together by using a guitar string. Next, I will wire those potentiometers to the selector switch, and then I will wire the pickups to the selector switch. The neat thing about guitar wiring and tone is that when the knobs are on 10, the pots and other components aren't affecting the tone. The electrical signal generated by the pickups is simply passing through unadulterated. It's only as you turn the tone knobs or volume knob down is when the electrical signal, and thus the tone, is affected. At this point, I'm just about finished wiring the harness, and I'll begin to wire the pickups to the selector switch. I'm using heat shrink tubing as a means to keep all the wires neat and so that they'll fit inside the cavity nicely. As you can see, I am pretty new at this, seeing that I'm using my mouth to try to hold the screwdriver in so that I can wire the leads to the back of the pot. The last thing you'll see in this clip is me getting the hot and ground leads that go to the jack wired up. Unfortunately, my phone died while filming, and I didn't realize it until afterwards, so I didn't get to film actually wiring the jack or the ground. I wired the ground to the claw, which holds the tremolo springs to the guitar. And then after that, I performed the screwdriver test, which you'll see next, and that allows you to check your work before you put the guitar back together and put strings on it. I began the neck cleanup while on board the tug by removing the tuners and nut, as well as removing the neck from the body of the guitar. This allowed me to get into all the nooks and crannies, as well as inspect the hardware. During this, I found that one of the tuners was actually broken, and I may have missed this had I not taken the extra step. I was able to order the tuner and didn't need to wait for it when I returned home. Once the neck was removed, I rubbed it down with Murphy's oil soap and warm water, followed by a damp rag to remove any soap residue. When finished, I reinstalled the neck and tuners. Once home, I continued the neck cleaning process by polishing the frets. To do this, I first covered the rosewood fretboard with painter's tape. It's important to make sure the pickups are covered, or the pole pieces will attract lots of the metal shavings. I polished the frets with 000 steel wool. This process really smoothed and shined the frets. If there was any more wear, I may have needed to sand, level, and crown the frets. However, I didn't need to do that here. I used a magnet from the fridge to capture most of the metal shavings before pulling off the painter's tape. I applied a coat of lemon oil to the fretboard, then removed the excess oil with a clean cotton ball. I like to do this every time I change strings, as it keeps the fretboard from drying out, plus it really makes the rosewood pop. I wanted to replace the synthetic bone nut that was installed at the factory. Changing the nut is a relatively simple and inexpensive mod you can make to your guitar to help it play and sound better. I purchased a Tusk nut made by a company called Graphtec for $14. Tusk is synthetic ivory, which is impregnated with Teflon. It's self-lubricating, which leads to less friction on the strings. It means that you don't need to add graphite to the nut slots when restringing. You can hear the difference between the synthetic bone nut and the Tusk nut in this drop test. Here's the original nut.
What is it, Daddy?
And here's the new one.
What's this for?
Much more glassy.
Why did you use this?
The nut I received was a little too thick to fit into the slot on the neck, so I sanded it down little by little until it fit in. Once it fit nicely in the slot, I needed to sand the bottom of the nut to attain the correct string height. Like I said during the wiring section, I am not a professional and have had no professional training. I used Dan Erlewine's How to Make Your Electric Guitar Play Great as a resource on technique and the specs I needed to attain. To attain the correct string height, I strung the first and sixth strings and then measured the distance between the bottom of the string and the top of the third fret using a feeler gauge. I used the fretboard to help file down the nut to the correct height without altering the radius of the nut, checking the height of the sixth and first strings every few passes on the sandpaper until I was happy with the result. This is a tedious process, but you can only remove material you sand off. You can't put it back. Checking every few passes is much better than finding out you took too much off and having to go buy another nut. I decided against gluing the nut down because it fits so snug. Once satisfied, I sanded down the edges of the nut so that it was flush with the side of the neck. I finished stringing the guitar at this point to begin doing the final setup on the guitar. As you can see here, I had plenty of help from my apprentice during this process. After stringing the guitar, I began the process of having it properly set up. Setting up the guitar refers to making adjustments so that the guitar plays as well as it can. I began by checking the neck relief. Relief refers to the state of the curvature of the neck. If a guitar neck is concave, it is said to be backbowed and will be impossible to play without buzzing. If the neck is too convex and has too much relief, it will be difficult to play, as you'll need to press the strings down further to get a note to ring out. This is often referred to as having high action. I like my neck to be almost flat. You can check the relief two different ways. One way is to use a slotted straight edge. The second is to create a straight edge by placing a capo at the first fret and then pressing down on the 17th fret. On a Stratocaster, the 17th fret is where the neck meets the body. While holding down the 17th fret, check relief at the 8th fret with a feeler gauge. Fender sets relief on modern Strats to 10,000ths of an inch relief. It's important that whenever you're taking measurements on a guitar, you should do it with the guitar in a playing position, not on its back, as this can skew the results due to gravity. To adjust the curvature of the neck, we can adjust the truss rod, which is a thin metal rod mounted inside of the neck. If you see the skunk stripe on the back of a Fender neck, this is where the truss rod is mounted. The neck of the guitar was straight, and I was happy to leave it that way. After checking relief, I set the height of the bridge. A Strat utilizes a floating bridge to facilitate use of a whammy bar. A floating bridge balances the tension from the strings on the top of the bridge with the springs holding the bottom of the bridge to the bottom of the guitar. To set the height of the bridge, I first loosen the strings as well as the claw on the back of the body. I then used a set of shims to set the distance from the bottom of the bridge to the body of the guitar to 1/8 of an inch. If I did this more often, I'd invest some time into fashioning a hardwood block into a wedge, as the cheap shims I used have a tendency to compress. Blocking the tremolo takes the springs out of play and allows you to make adjustments quicker. To adjust the string height, I first placed a capo at the 1st fret. This takes the height of the nut out of play when measuring. Next, I tuned to pitch and measured the height of the string at the 17th fret. To adjust the string height, I'm adjusting the saddles with an Allen wrench. It's a bit of a balancing act because each saddle has 2 screws which need to be adjusted. I set the high E string to 62,000ths of an inch and the low E string to 70,000ths of an inch. Once I have the correct string height on the 2 outside E strings, I used an under-string radius gauge to set the string height of the A, D, G, and B strings. You want to use the underside of the strings so that it takes string gauge out of play. Here's a better view of an understring radius gauge. I've mentioned radius a couple times now, so let me cover radius for a second. Most guitar fretboards aren't flat, they're curved to a radius. Vintage Fenders have a radius of 7 1/4 inches, which is very round and comfortable for playing chords. Modern Fenders are slightly flatter at 9 1/2 inches, Gibsons are 12 inches, and many quote-unquote super strats are anywhere from 16 to 20 inch radius, which is much flatter and great for soloing. Once the string height is correct, I adjusted the height of the pickups by tightening or loosening the screws on the side of each pickup. This is important because if the strings are too low, you'll have low output and a thin sound. If it's set too high, it's easy for the sound to get muddy and can also cause tuning issues as the magnets in the pickups exert too much force on the string above. This is an adjustment that you can easily change later if you don't quite get the sound you're looking for. Intonation is the process of making the guitar play in tune with itself. Guitars are built to a scale length. Fenders are 25 1/2 inches, Gibsons are 24 3/4. A shorter scale requires less tension to produce the same pitch as a longer scale instrument. This makes it easier to fret and bend notes. However, it also makes it susceptible to buzzing, particularly when playing hard. To intonate, tune a string using the 12th fret harmonic. Once it is in tune, fret the 12th fret and check your tuning. If it is sharp, then you need to lengthen the string by tightening the screw attached to the back of the bridge saddles. If when fretting the 12th fret it is flat, then you need to shorten the string by loosening the screw on the back of the saddle. You'll need to retune each time you adjust the saddle. This is a much quicker task if you have a high-quality tuner. Here's an example of me intonating one of the strings of the guitar. So the harmonic is in tune, and let's see what happens when we fret at the 12th fret at the E string. See, it looks a little flat, so that's fretted. and here's harmonic. See, the harmonic doesn't move, it's dead on. And then when I fret it, it's just a little bit flat, which means I need to shorten the length of the string, which means I have to loosen the saddle. We're almost there though, we're getting pretty close, so let's tune back up. Every time you adjust that saddle, you're going to need to retune. Alright, that's pretty good. Let's see. Harmonic. No real movement. Fretted. Still a little flat. So let's shorten that string gauge some more. Scale length, I'm sorry, not string gauge. Tune it back up. Alright, that's good, and that's good. So I would call that string intonated properly.
The last step of the setup is removing the shims on the back of the guitar. I did this by slowly tightening the claw until the springs had taken enough of the tension for the shims to essentially fall out on their own. I played this guitar for a good hour or two after I finished setting it up, and I was quite pleased with how it came out.
While I went through the process of repairing my friend's Made in Mexico Strat, I thought a neat idea would be to do a comparison between this guitar and my 2001 American Standard, seeing that they're of pretty similar vintages, and should be a pretty apples to apples comparison to see what parts of each guitar I happen to like better. So what I'm going to do is go through each selector switch, clean, overdriven, and then high gain. And then when I edit it, it will go back and forth. So you'll hear the Mexican Strat neck pickup followed by the American Standard neck pickup, so on and so forth. And at the end, I'll do a conclusion on overall what my thoughts were regarding the two guitars. For the overdriven portion, I'm going to be using the Mojo Mojo from TC Electronics. For the high gain portion of this shootout, I'll be using the Angry Charlie side of a JHS Sweet Tea.
So it's been a week since I recorded the Shootout, and I just got a chance to listen to the 2 clips. Let me start off by saying that I had a lot of fun on this project. I really enjoyed every step of the process, and I'm thrilled to be able to give my friend an instrument that he can enjoy for years to come. Coming into it, I was a little concerned knowing that it had been in a flood, but outside of cleaning, there weren't any structural issues that I needed to deal with. I spent about 12 hours working on this guitar over the course of 3 weeks, and it cost $85 in parts to get it working again. Playability-wise, both this guitar and my American Standard played virtually identical. Mine was slightly stiffer because I have 10s on mine. I put 9s on his. There were 2 major differences. One is the pickups. The pickups in the Mexican Strat were much noisier. The 60-cycle hum was much more pronounced than my guitar. That being said, I wouldn't have realized that there was that much of a difference without playing them side by side. I played his guitar for a couple hours after I finished setting it up. I played it for a couple hours the day that I recorded the Shootout, and I really enjoyed playing it. The other difference was that when I did the screwdriver test, I was surprised to find out that the bottom tone control actually controls the middle pickup. I've had my Strat since 2003, and it's always been the bottom tone knob controls the bridge. So I actually went back to the schematic after I did the screwdriver test to see if I had made a mistake, and it turns out that that's actually the standard way to wire a Strat, and that mine had been wired not wrong, but just differently over 20 years ago. It must have been at the factory, because I bought this guitar from a classmate in high school. I know he didn't mod it. I know I never modded it. And when I got back to work, I talked to a coworker of mine who builds his own guitars and is very knowledgeable about this kind of stuff. And he actually told me that it's called the Eric Johnson mod. So I thought it was pretty cool that I learned something about my own instrument during this process. I didn't normalize the volumes between the 2 clips. So if one was louder than the other, it's because it was louder. I didn't change anything. The amp settings were the same. The pedal settings were the same. All the knobs on both guitars were on 10. I did check the resistance again after the Shootout on both guitars, so I'll have that on the screen. In closing, I'm looking forward to getting this guitar back to my friend, and I hope you enjoyed the video, and thank you for watching. Have a great day.